All right, buckle up because today we're diving headfirst into a world of dramatic irony, social commentary, and oh yeah, a good old-fashioned mystery. You ready to unlock some secrets about J.B. Priestley's and Inspector Calls?
Let's do it. And Inspector Calls is one of those plays that grabs you by the collar and doesn't let go until the very end.
No kidding. And today we're going beyond just the whodunit to really unpack how Priestley uses the entire theatrical experience to make his points hit even harder.
It's like he's carefully constructed this whole pressure cooker of a play to force us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the society we live in.
Okay, so for anyone who might not be familiar with the play, An Inspector Calls revolves around this seemingly normal dinner party for a wealthy family in 1912 England, the Burlings. They're celebrating, feeling pretty good about themselves, and then bam.
Inspector Ghoul arrives.
Right. This mysterious inspector shows up, investigating the death of a young woman, and suddenly the Burling family's perfect little world starts to crumble.
And the way Priestley sets up this unraveling is brilliant. He sticks to these really rigid rules, what we call the classical unities. One place, one time, one main plot line.
I've always heard that term thrown around, classical unities, but to be honest, I kind of just nod along like I know what it means. What's the significance of it for us in the audience?
Well, think of it this way. Priestley drops this pressure cooker lid right on top of the Burling family. Everything, and I mean everything, unfolds inside that dining room on that one single night. And that intensity just builds and builds with each passing moment.
Ooh, I can feel the tension already. So not only are the characters trapped, but we're kind of trapped right along with them, aren't we?
Exactly. As an audience member, you wouldn't want to be caught at that dinner table for all the money in Mr. Burling's factory.
You're making me sweat just thinking about it. But it's true, that sense of claustrophobia, of being right there in the thick of it with the characters, it sucks us right in, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And that single setting, that dining room, it's not just any room, it becomes this microcosm of the society they all live in.
That's a good point. You've got the wealthy, powerful Burlings at the head of the table, literally dictating the conversation.
While the inspector, representing a more moral authority, slowly chips away at their facade. It's like their carefully constructed world is crumbling around them.
So it's almost like that dining table transforms into a courtroom as the play goes on.
Precisely. With the inspector acting as both judge and jury, ready to expose all the hypocrisy lurking beneath those polished surfaces. And here's where Priestley really starts playing with our expectations as an audience, because we're sitting there knowing things these characters don't, especially the patriarch, Arthur Burling.
Arthur Burling, the king of being blissfully unaware.
Right. He's so self-satisfied, so sure of himself and his place in the world. He's practically boasting about how war is impossible, how the Titanic is practically unsinkable, which, knowing what we know about history...
Makes you want to jump out of your seat and be like, dude, wrong answer.
Exactly. But that's how Priestley reveals Burling's arrogance, how blind he is to the real problems in the world. And maybe even more importantly, the part he plays in those problems.
It's like weaponized dramatic irony.
Exactly. We're in on the joke, so to speak. And it makes every word Burling utters just drip with this unintentional irony that just ratchets up the tension.
And just when you think the tension can't get any thicker, Priestley introduces the inspector's interrogation style.
It's like a perfectly crafted domino effect, isn't it?
Sure.
Each character gets their turn in the hot seat, forced to confront their role in this young woman's downfall.
And we're sitting on the edge of our seats thinking, who's next? What did they do? It's like Priestley's dangling clues like a master puppeteer, making us desperate to understand the bigger picture.
And just when you think you've got Priestley all figured out, he layers in this whole other thing that really messes with you.
You're talking about the whole time situation, right? It's like, okay, the play is set in 1912. We're already thinking about the Titanic. But then Priestley wrote the thing in 1945. So it's like this whole other layer of history, this echo hanging over everything. 2 world wars happened in between.
And that's what makes this play so much more than just a historical drama. Priestley knew exactly what he was doing, setting it in 1912, but writing it in 1945. It's like he's talking directly to his audience right there in the theater, forcing them to look at what happened, what they let happen, twice even. Those world wars, they didn't come out of nowhere.
Like he's shining a spotlight right on their own recent history and saying, notice any parallels here? Maybe about what happens when you ignore inequality and just let that stuff fester.
Yes, exactly. He's holding up this mirror to society and being like, take a good long look. Are you really going to let this happen again? Yeah. But what's really wild is how he doesn't just play with time in terms of like historical context. He messes with it within the structure of the play itself.
Yeah, it's not like we're just getting a history lesson, right? It's more about how that one night, that inspector's visit, unfolds.
Right, the whole play happens during that one pressure cooker evening,
Yeah.
which definitely ups the drama, but it also lets Priestley take time and, like, I don't know, condense it or something. So we see how actions have these ripple effects that go way beyond just that moment.
So even though the play technically only lasts a few hours, we're forced to confront the fact that what these characters did months, even years ago, is still impacting people right now in the present. Past might not be dead, right? It's not even past.
Word. And just when the Burlings, especially the older ones, are starting to think they can get away with it, that they can go back to their comfy lives and sweep everything under the rug, that phone rings.
Ugh, chills. Every time I see that ending, think maybe they got away with it. Maybe actions don't always have consequences. Nope. Priestley yanks the rug out from under you. Was the inspector even real? Is this just going to happen again?
That ending is masterful, right? It's not about tying everything up in a neat little bow. It makes you think, makes you uncomfortable. You have to sit with those unsettling questions long after the curtain falls.
Totally. It's like that feeling you get when you see your reflection in a window at night and for a second you don't recognize yourself.
Hey.
And that brings us to the character who's really the driving force of all this reflection, Inspector Ghoul himself. He's more than just a detective, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. He's like this force of nature, a walking, talking representation of your own conscience, that little voice we all have inside, telling us when we've screwed up, even when we try to justify it.
Yeah, and the way he owns that dining room, the way he always knows exactly what to say to get under the Burling's skin, it's almost like he's got supernatural powers or something.
Right, like he sees right through their fancy clothes and their fancy words, right to the heart of who they really are. He's not there to solve a crime. He's there to make them see the true cost of their actions, not just on this one girl, but on everyone around them.
Hmm.
And he doesn't just do this through his words. Priestley uses some pretty heavy-hitting imagery to get his point across, like that moment when the lighting changes as soon as the inspector enters the room.
Oh, I love that detail. It's so subtle, but it totally changes the mood. Like at the beginning of the play, right?
Yep.
It's all warm and cozy, almost hiding what's really going on in that family.
Totally. It's like they've got this perfect little bubble, and as long as they don't look too closely, everything seems fine and dandy. But then Inspector Ghoul shows up.
And bam, that cozy lighting's gone.
It gets harsher, more intense, like he's shining a spotlight on all their secrets, forcing them out into the open.
And then there's that doorbell. Every time Burling starts going on and on about his business, about how the world should work, according to Arthur Burling. Purring. Talk about a reality check.
It's like that doorbell is wired directly to our nervous systems, right? It's Priestley's way of reminding us that out there, in the real world, Mr. Burling's little capitalist fairy tales don't matter. Social status, money, doesn't count for much when reality comes knocking.
It all circles back to that ripple effect we were talking about, but like amplified.
Right. And it all comes back to how Priestley uses the structure of the play itself. He's not just standing on a soapbox lecturing us about social responsibility. He's crafted this incredibly intricate, puzzle.
With all the dramatic irony and the symbolism, even that perfectly timed doorbell.
Exactly. It's designed to make us think, to make us confront these hard truths about how our actions impact others, even when we don't want to see it.
And that's why even almost a century later, this play still packs a punch, It's not just a well-made mystery. You walk out of that theater changed. At least I do.
Totally. It's a call to action disguised as a suspenseful thriller. So after this deep dive into an Inspector Calls, with all its twists and turns, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will really hold on to?
Ooh, good question. What would you say is the most important thing to take away from this play?
Priestley was a master of asking those hard-hitting questions. He doesn't spoon-feed us the answers. And I think he'd love that you're asking that. If I had to pick one thing, though, just one, I'd say it's this. Next time you find yourself thinking, oh, that's not my problem, or I'm just one person, what can I do? Think of Inspector Ghoul.
Ooh, good one.
Right? Because every action we take, even little ones, they all have these ripple effects. They impact other people for good or for bad. And that's something we all have to live with.
Man, that's powerful stuff. And on that note, if you haven't already experienced the brilliance of an Inspector Calls, go check it out. It's a classic for a reason, and trust us, we've only scratched the surface.